Microphone check. Check 1, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. The Coffee and Biscotti Show. I'm your host, Coach or Crew Mel Bellissimo. Today is Friday, March 4th, 2022. It is just past 12 o'clock EST. And if you can't tell already, man, am I ever stoked about today. Quite possibly the biggest and most important interview of my life today. And I couldn't be more excited. I want to give a special shout out to a gentleman who always helps me on the show, Mr. Poutine Nation, Josh Leslie, all the way from the Azores. Thank you so much, Josh, for being here. Check 1, 2, indeed, my friends. Can you feel it? Can you feel the energy? Can you, wherever you're sitting right now, in whatever city you're sitting in, can you feel the energy of today's show? Holy smokes. I'm almost out of breath from sitting down. Because today, my friends, I have a man that has inspired me for over 20 years. Now, I want to give you some context with that. I've never met this man before. I've never met the man. But the power in his words have touched my heart for over 20 years in a way that truly saved my life. So I'm going to get personal with you today, my friends, because I think it's time. I am starting the mediation process with the mother of my child, and on August 17th of 2020, we had a conversation in which she said, "Mel, I don't love you anymore." And it was the words of Kent Nerburn, my guest today, that quite literally saved my life. He doesn't know that. He's backstage listening to that. But this man saved my life because of his words. Please allow me the opportunity to read you a little passage from Kent Nerburn's book, Simple Truths, and his chapter on love. It is a mystery why we fall in love. It is a mystery how it happens. It is a mystery when it comes. It is a mystery why some loves grow. And it is a mystery why some loves fail. You can analyze this mystery and look for reasons and causes, but you will never do any more than take the life out of the experience. Love is more than the sum of the interests, attractions, and commonalities that two people share. And just as life itself is a gift that comes and goes in its time, the coming of love must be taken as an unfathomable gift that cannot be questioned in its ways. Too often when love comes to people, they try to grasp the love and hold it to themselves, refusing to see the gift it is a gift freely given and a gift that just as freely moves away. When they fall out of love, or the person they love feels the spirit of love leaving, they try desperately to reclaim the love that is lost, rather than accepting the gift for what it was. They want answers where there are no answers. They want to know what is wrong with them, or they try to get their lover to change, thinking that if some small thing were different, love would bloom again. They blame their circumstances. They blame each other. They try anything to give meaning to what has happened. But there is no meaning beyond the love itself. And until they accept its own mysterious ways, they will live in a sea of misery. You need to treat what love brings you with kindness. If you find yourself in love with someone who does not love you, be gentle with yourself. There is nothing wrong with you. Love just didn't choose to rest in the other person's heart. If you find someone else in love with you, toward whom you feel no love, feel honored that love came and called at your door, but gently refuse the gift you cannot return. Do not take advantage. Do not cause pain. How you deal with love is how love will deal with you. And all our hearts feel the same pains and joys, even if our lives and ways are very different. If you fall in love with another who falls in love with you, and then love chooses to leave, do not try to reclaim it or to assess blame. Let it go. There is a reason and there is a meaning. You will know it in time, but time itself will choose the moment. Remember this and keep it in your heart. You don't choose love. Love chooses you. All you can really do is accept it for all its mystery when it comes into your life. Feel the way it fills you to overflowing. Then reach out and give it away. Give it back to the person who brought it to you. Give it to others who seem poor in spirit. Give it to the world around you in any way you can. Love has its own time, its own season, and its own reasons for coming and going. You cannot bribe it or coerce it or reason it into staying. If it chooses to leave your heart or the heart of your lover, there is nothing you can do and nothing you should do. Be glad that it came to live for a moment in your life. If you keep your heart open, it will surely come again. Whew. That saved my life. Because when my wife told me she didn't love me, I remembered these words. And how that I don't need to try to blame anyone or try to coerce it into staying. But to be grateful that love came to rest in my life, even for but a moment in time. Ladies and gentlemen, I read a book once, and please know that I'm not a fabulous reader. But I read and I listened to an audiobook written by another author, another one of my favorites. His name is Neale Donald Walsch, and he wrote a series of books called Conversations with God. And in this book, the representation of God says that God doesn't come to us in words. Because he says words are so limiting. You can love a banana split and you can love your partner. But we all know that the love and the depth of that love is very different. But the English language doesn't have another word to describe the depths of the love. So that God comes to you in feeling and experience. That really resonated with me. And then I thought about our guest, Kent Nerburn, who has a way that I've never found in any other writing. A way that touches my heart, that sings to my soul. He is just an absolute gem of a human being. I owe a great deal of my life to this man. And that's pretty cool, because when you never meet a guy and he has that impact, what happens when you meet him? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know what? Here's my chance. This is what I call a dream come true. The interview of a lifetime. And I'll tell you what's even the best part about this. Some people, when they meet their heroes, their whatever they are to you, their favorite actors or favorite sports personality, there's this expectation that one may have when you meet someone. Oh, I can only imagine Kent Nerburn's going to be like this, very, very sophisticated man who's, very well spoken, and he's very intelligent, and he is. But do you remember I shared with you a line a little while ago about how a lion never ever needs to tell you that he's a lion because they already know they're a lion? To me, Kent Nerburn is the embodiment of this. Because if you meet him, he's an ordinary dude, just like me and you. And he says, I just chose writing because that's my job. And here he is, impacting all of the lives that his book has touched. And I have to say that I want to share with you a little bit about my first interaction with Kent, because I was so giddy, and I said, please, Kent, just pardon me, excuse me for the energy, because I don't want to come across as a fanboy, but I'm a fan. And having the opportunity to speak to Kent was a dream come true. He is an award-winning author. He's the author of 16 books on spirituality and Native American subjects, including the internationally recognized trilogy, Neither Wolf Nor Dog, The Wolf at Twilight, and The Girl Who Sang to the Buffalo. Before his writing career, he was a sculptor. He's a father. He's a husband. And to many, a spiritual teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, I want you to get off of your comfortable seat and put your hands together for my number one man, Kent Nerburn. And the crowd goes wild.
Right. Am I coming through?
Yes, you're good.
Wonderful. Okay. I would start by saying, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But the curtain's up. So here we go.
Here we go.
I could also tell you, as I said to Mel yesterday, when he was going on with this voluble, I don't even know the guy he talks about. I know the guy when he writes. I know that guy. When I write, I'm that guy. When I live in the world, I'm not. And I tend to say to him that, you've just added someone that I needed, because the only people that thought of me that way in the past, I've lived with my wife too long. She knows, she knows the warts and all, but it was my grandson and my dog. And my dog died, and my grandson became a teenager. So I had nobody, but now I got Mel. And so away we go.
You got me, indeed.
Right. Well, so I mean, what do we want to do? How do you want to do this, Mel? I'm excited about this, because I don't talk about myself. I don't like to talk about myself. And I don't know, what made me decide to do it? I don't know, time, season, serendipity, cosmic forces, the fact that I've got a last name that's best said with a mouthful of peanut butter, and you've got a last name, Bellissimo, but the most beautiful. And so, well, why not? That sounds like a good guy. And so, yeah, I'll go where we can go. I'll go anywhere we want to go. I'll go deeper than I normally go, and I'll just open my heart as best I can. So,
thank you.
How do you want to do this?
Well, I think that the first thing, Kent, that I want to say is, I have never been so honored in my life to have you spend 90 minutes with us. And the way that I always start my show is just explaining, especially to those that are new, that the reason why that this started, that this show came to be, Kent, was because our dear friend who helps me moderate the show, his name is Josh Leslie. He goes by the handle Poutine Nation. He said that I needed to bring this energy to the world. And he said, what would the show be about? And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, this should be a show about people sharing their stories of passions and transformations. And so in saying that, I would ask you to, can you paint us a picture, Kent, of who's this guy that everybody here? I've been a mixed martial arts coach for almost 25 years, Kent. I've met a lot of wonderful people, and Crew Mel, the teacher, is saying that there's this man who's influenced his life for 20 years. Paint us a picture, Kent. Who is this amazing guy that Mel's absolutely head over heels over?
Well, he's not that amazing a guy. Number one, I've told people that my books are my best self. My sculptures were my best self to the extent that I was able to do that, to put myself into them. I'm a better writer than I was a sculptor, which saddens me, but that's the way it is. But that's my best self. And I tell people that, when consider yourself in dealing with me that you're walking over a bridge. There's the Billy Goat Scruff. You're walking over a bridge, and you see an angel, and there's a guy underneath the bridge, a troll underneath the bridge, holding up an angel on a stick. And you walk over and you look over and say, wait a minute, I see that guy. No. And I say, look at the angel on the stick. Look at the angel on the stick. And that's the one I want you to, that's who I want you to see. Most of you don't know me. You never will know me. I live a compromised life. I struggle, I slog through the world trying to be kind, just like everybody else. But ultimately, I have a rare opportunity to put my best self out there. Most people don't get to do that, but I do. And so the person that is in my books is always my best self. If there's one thing I can say about my work, I'm not a hard worker. I'm a deep worker, but not a hard worker. I think more than I work. I'm lazy, but I'm excellent. I will never do anything except with excellence. And that gives you a peace. If you only are excellent in everything you do, even if you grow past it, even if in retrospect it looks naive and you feel like you could have done better, you did your best at all times. So that's sort of the prolegomena to who I am. When you said talk about yourself, I thought, how do I talk about myself? Well, I'll start with 3 stories, one of which I've never told anyone because it sounds too weird. I came into the world with kind of a dark knowledge. My mom used to say, he cried all the time. We never knew why he cried. Well, there was a stillborn child before me. I came into the world through a womb that had the knowledge of death. Now, people out there, some people are going to be saying, whoa, that's real, I understand it. Other people are going to be saying, whoa, this guy's a crackpot, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mention that because that affected me and kept me quiet and watching in a way that I never knew from the time I was born. And I also want to say that that's an example of what drew me. There are a few things that drove me into the arms of the Native American people. When I was working, I did an oral history job on the Red Lake Reservation in northern Minnesota. Out in the woods, 100 miles from the nearest freeway, the largest reservation, one of the largest reservations that all the land is held in common. Trees, lakes, woods, that's it. And I ran an oral history project. And we lived 15 miles from the reservation. And I remember one day, my son got 4 kids. 3 came with the package with my wife, and 1 is ours. And he came much later, obviously. And he had he was crying at night. He was crying all the time. And we didn't know what to do. We're out there in the woods. I'm worried about it. We take him to the doctor. And the doctor says, "Oh, he needs what do you put in your ears? The tubes put in his ears." I go up to the reservation, and I'm talking to the women who were my friends that I worked with, I brought kids into the senior nutrition center where the elders came for lunch. And I was talking about how he cried, and she said, "Oh yeah, he's got, he's just, he's just come into the world, and he has some unfinished business on the other side, and he's crying because he can't go back and finish that business." Now there is someone talking to me in a way that ties directly into the guy who just told you that he came into the world with the knowledge that he couldn't, that of something dark. And this darkness it's in my nature. Uh, as I said, I had 3 stories that I'd tell you about who I am. The second one, and all of these, by the way, dovetail into my absolute embrace of the values of the Native people that I think we need to put into our lives in this crazy time in contemporary America and the world, contemporary world. But the second story is my father's job. My dad was the director of disaster services for the American Red Cross in Hennepin County, Minneapolis, big city. And what that meant was that he went out to fires. He'd get a call at the same time the fire department or the police department get a call. He had this little box on the desk called a plectron that was always squawking and giving out information. And it might say that there was that there's a 4-alarm fire on the north side, which meant that my dad had to go out in the middle of the night and and bring food to the people, or get them shelter, bring them clothing, get these people who had just suffered some disaster, and try to help them. And my dad was someone who he couldn't speak his heart. He really struggled with it. So everything was symbolic. And he would come to the door, he'd knock on the door. You can't, there's a 4-alarm on the north side. You want to go along? And of course, that was my way of being with my dad as I went with him. So I'd get out of my little suburban bed, little post-war bungalow bed where I had a good life, albeit a pretty ordinary life, a lower middle class, middle class, post-war kid, all the soldiers coming home. And I'd get out of bed, go with my dad, and we'd drive to this horrific scene of some sort. I mean, the things I saw, there's a couple. I remember one time going to a fire where this was a jet crash, and they were taking bodies out on a stretcher. And I saw this charred foot of a boy, a child, probably a boy about my age, sticking out of the, out from under this blanket. Another one, my dad was sent to a drowning in a lake, in one of the local lakes, and we went there, and he had to provide coffee and food to the rescue people. And I was sitting on the beach, and the mother it turns out it was a young boy, was sitting down the beach from me. It's dark in the middle of the night. It's sitting there shivering and cold, and out there in the lake are this rowboat that did actually with a small motor going back and forth across the lake with a grappling hook. And the grappling hook is meant to hook on the body if they can find it. Goes through, reaches, and all of a sudden I hear a guy out there, they're shining a flashlight, and all you see is this flashlight on this dark water. We're sitting there, and the guy yells out, "I got something." And they pull up this boy, this bloated body of this little boy. And from across the beach, I hear this wail that goes through all of eternity, all of space, right into my soul. Third story. We're going to a fire. It's in downtown Minneapolis. It's a big apartment building. And my dad says, stay in the car. It's the middle of the winter, and everything turns to ice. You're looking at this charred-out building with these stalactites of ice coming down. And he said, "I want you to, you stay in the car, and I'm going to send this woman in." There was an old woman, and how old she was, I don't know. She seemed old as the hills to me. And he said, "I want you to just try to comfort her." And he probably wouldn't have used those words, but that's what it was. And he puts her in the car, and she's sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and said, "My cat's in that building. My cat's still in the building. Can you go get the cat, please go get the cat. Tell him to get my cat. I, of course, can't go get the cat. I can't do anything. And this woman is sobbing, and I can do nothing about it. I don't remember whether I put my arm around her. I don't know whether I did anything, whether I just sat there. But anyway, these are the kind of events. Then what do? I get in the car with my dad. We go home. I get back into my bed. It's the middle of the night, and I go to sleep, and I wake up in the morning. And I go down to the kitchen, and I say, and I go to the bathroom. And I say, "Geez, I wonder, I wonder if this girl in school that I kind of like will like me. I wonder if I got a cool belt. I don't have a cool belt like the other kids." And I'm thinking, my life doesn't matter. I'm completely, what I've seen is so much bigger than my experience. And at a time in my life when I should have been developing my own, my own identity, when kids are self-absorbed, I couldn't care about myself because I had seen a bigger world. And so the self and interest in myself became much less than my interest in other people and other people's stories. And that was, an indelible imprint on me, and it's never changed. I don't like to talk about myself. I would rather try to extract your story than to give my story. And then the third story was the fact that, you got to be old or maybe an evangelical. But if you're an old pre-Vatican II Catholic, you understand this. But there aren't too many of us left. My mother was Lutheran. My dad was Catholic. My dad was a doctrinaire Catholic. He wasn't a deeply spiritual man, but he believed in the orders and the rules of the Catholic Church. And I was a very spiritual little kid, probably because of that whole experience of this sense of a mystery of otherness in my life. And you would go to church, and it was a wonderful ritual. I mean, the magic of the pre-Vatican II Latin Catholic Church is, people denigrate it because the church has become it's always been kind of a corrupt political organization, but the majesty and miracle of the transubstantiation. If you believe these things, you're in a different world. And what I was taught was that my mother was going to hell because she was Lutheran, and there was nothing I could do to keep her out of hell. And this sounds literary, but it wasn't at that age. It wasn't to me. That's the way it felt. It's the way I would pray, don't let my mom go to hell. Don't let my mom go to hell. And, but I was told there was nothing I could do about it. Now, I'll leave it those three stories, except to say, jump ahead. One of the reasons, those are two reasons why, again, I ran into the embrace of the Native American values, because one, they don't believe in the individuated self in the same way that we do. They recognize the collectivity. Someone who doesn't believe in the sort of revelation and unfolding and development of the individuated self, which is who I was, fit perfectly with their way of understanding the world. And I understood the trauma of their experience from the boarding schools. And those of you who don't know about the Indian boarding schools, it's starting to come out. But trust me, that's cultural post-traumatic stress disorder for an entire people. It's what we did to them. And they went through that kind of trauma of being told that their grandparents were going to hell, that there was nothing they could do. Their whole way of understanding the world was flawed. There was this place where people burned forever in a fire that could not be quenched. I met people who talked about, and I wrote about it in one of my books, about having a priest put a cigarette into put it out in the palm of their hand. You say, "You feel that pain?" And they say, "Yes." He said, "That's what it's like, except it's your whole body and it lasts forever." These people experienced something that, though I couldn't experience, I could enter into it in a distant way. And they recognized that in me, that I understood. I didn't try to be them. It didn't matter to me, but I understood something about the trauma and the depth and the power of mystery in their lives. So anyway, I mentioned those three stories because it's kind of a start for who I am and where I am. And the person that I become doesn't necessarily talk about those things, but I reflect them. I would say that, 90%, well, maybe it's not that high anymore. I'm getting older. I'm starting to interact in the world more. But let's say 85% of me, no one ever sees. No one ever sees. I like to say that when I deal with people, I see that there are like three levels of people. There's the public self that we all have, uh, and it changes from person to person, situation to situation. There's the private self that we share with a few people. And then there's the secret self that we don't share with anybody. And some people don't even know that secret self inside of them. Other people live inside of that as as where their whole life is and their whole being is. And people don't see my secret self. A few people see my private self. And then there's people, like, someone like you, Mel, you look and say, your story about the lion is nice. I don't know, maybe it's a lion, maybe it's a pussycat, maybe it's maybe it's a marmot. I don't know, but you see what it is, and I'm glad you see what it is. And so, that's again a long prologue, but it's just about as heartfelt a prologue as I can give. And when I'm inventing my, when I'm inventing my way of looking at my story, and any one of us can look at our story 100 different ways, that's one of the ways that seems the most authentic to me.
Well, and I think that what fascinates me about it, Kent, is that you say that you come in with this darkness with you, this understanding of darkness, and yet the books you write are full of light.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I love it so much.
Well, can I say something to that?
Please.
Yeah. We've all got a spiritual task in life. It's something that, it's the mark of Cain on our forehead. What's your life's job? And my life's job was to climb out of that darkness into some light, and to lean toward the phrase that I use it all the time. I stole it from Barry Lopez, one of my favorite writers, leaning towards the light. You have to constantly lean towards the light. And if there's a reason why I think my work has been successful, is that it acknowledges the darkness, but it leans towards the light. We're living in such an odd time right now. There's such there's been this obsession with the self that became a central tenet of our sort of cultural and individual development in America. And I think it came both from some negative sources of a country of individualism, but also there's a spiritual yearning that through the whole Buddhist tradition, that the clarification, and the Eastern traditions, so the clarification of self and purification of self is a goal, but it's only a goal in order for service into a larger world. And what's happened is a lot of this has closed in on itself. It's only about, in every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. How do I become a better person, a higher person? Well, how much does does the clarification of self speak to some mother running from bombs in the Ukraine with her baby to her breast? That's not an issue for them. It wasn't an issue for the native people on the Nez Perce Trail in the book that I did on the Nez Perce, who had to leave their children, their grandmothers and grandfathers on the side of the road because they couldn't travel fast enough, and they'd wrap them up in their best blanket and leave them singing their death songs and go off seeking, to try to escape and save the rest of the rest of the tribe. What does clarification and purification of self have to do with those people? Absolutely nothing. And yes, it happens to them, but that isn't that isn't the way they look at the world, and isn't the way that I want to look at the world. I want to look at the world saying, it's not only warm puppies, holding warm puppies, and it is, but it's also dead dogs on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And you better see them both if you're going to be a full human being. And so I think that's why my books have resonated. The people who want us to see the good in that part you read, my God, that's good writing. And what a pure heart that was at the time.
Oh.
And that's a 40-year-old man who just, you hit me at my sweet spot right there. That was a book really written for my son. It was, we can talk about that later. But, I'm more compromised now. I'm 75. I feel the door is slammed behind me, and here on a glide path into the ground. it gives me a different set of responsibilities. But that man was young, raising children in the fresh bloom of fresh love with my wife and our family, and just pouring out the best of myself. That's an example. Like I said, I could never write that book again. That was a work of excellence for the time, and I'm so glad I did it. But when you read it, I say, God, I don't know if I can find that person anymore. But he was there, and I got him up. So
You certainly did, and that was what we call the grand slam home run, my friend. That's
well,
for sure.
for you when you were at the plate, that's good.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
So, but Kent, what I want to, and what I want to help with this picture in painting your life is that so you come with these experiences, you share these stories of background. You ended up going to university. So can you pick up from there? So you went to university. You managed to get a PhD in religion and art, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And your love was for sculpting, to be a sculptor.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Talk us through that.
Do you have those images?
I do. So I'm going to do this. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can share, my friend. Okay, hold on a second. Let's see. I'm going to try to do this, Mr. Josh Leslie. 1 second. I'm going to show this one first. Elegy, I think it's called.
That's the last one. Nope. Go to. Let's see. I don't even see the rest of them.
There's the Joseph Head, Healing Full, Judas, Joseph with Kent.
No, do you have the John the Baptist, or did that not come through?
I don't think that one came through.
Let's go to the Judas Head. Okay.
Can everybody see that? Yeah.
All right.
Excellent. Okay. Let me just come back. There we go. Oh no! Why does it do that?
So we see everything that was ever written. There we go.
Okay. How about that? Can you guys see that?
That's good enough. Okay.
Okay. Perfect.
Why did I go into sculpture? Well, there's the practical reason of I was, as an undergraduate, I was a good student. I was an excellent student, as a matter of fact. I came out with a summa cum laude and a Phi Beta Kappa, and guy's on his way. And I went, I got admitted to graduate school at Stanford. I went to Stanford, and I didn't fit there. Stanford is a wonderful school. I was not a wonderful person at the time. I mean, when I blushed when I think of the character that I was, wandering the quad at Stanford, wearing a sheet tucked in as a shirt because I didn't want to, I didn't want to be, buy into bourgeois reality, and carrying I literally had a wooden bowl on a rope on my side because I thought you should only have one bowl to eat with. Why should we have more than one utensil? And anyway, and the pipe smoking Stanfordites saw this and said, this guy's walking down a strange road right now. But there was a small program. This was a graduate program in religion and art, or no, actually it was religious studies and humanities, and they sent me to Europe. They said, you've got to get some other languages, and so German was the language that they recommended because it was in effect a theology program. And so I went to Germany, and I was miserable at Stanford. God, I didn't like the place. My world had been at the University of Minnesota, had been sort of a beatnik reality, punching down the railroad tracks, Bob Dylan style. And I got to Stanford, this bright, light, beautiful, rich, verdant place on the peninsula, and I didn't want to go back. And anyway, so I was miserable there for any number of reasons in Europe. And but I decided if I'm going to learn German, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to go be among the German people. I went there myself. I got off in Amsterdam, hitchhiked into the middle of Germany. I'd been told to go to Marburg because they spoke good German there. And so I said, I can't hang out with Americans. I can't deal with Americans. I have to just get in with the Germans. So, it's a long way around, and I'll shorten the way up. But anyway, I ended up going to finding an antiquary store. And I went into him and said, can I work with you? Because they only spoke German. And he said yes. And I went in and I worked in this antique restoration shop. And during the day, I would wander. On days I wasn't working, I'd wander through the museums. And there were these farmer museums, Bauernkunst, where they had these works of art that had done. It was a medieval town, and so there were beautiful medieval sculptures everywhere, but there were these yearning sculptures of people that just struggled out as farmers in their back shed with tools. And they had so much more heart in them than anything I saw in the other museums. And I said, that's what I want to do. I wanted to make images of spiritual content. I wanted to embody spiritual states in wood. So I asked them to give me a block of wood, and they gave me a big piece of maple and some chisels, and I started working. And the man who struggled at the university fell in love with something that obliterated time. And when you find something that obliterates time, you found something that touches your heart. Now, why was I doing this?
I love that.
Part of the reason I was doing this, and I didn't really realize it was only in retrospect that I understood this. I talk about my mom. Well, let's go take the 3 stories, just file them away in there. I was always a spiritual person, but I would never, after seeing what had been done to my mom, be willing to be part of what I said, what a Confucian teacher of mine later in graduate school said was a membership religion. He said, Western cultures, the problem with Western religions is they are membership religions, which means there's the insiders and the outsiders. I was a spiritual person interested in the larger issues of life and the mysteries of life, and yet I couldn't, and I loved the Catholic tradition I'd grown up in, even though I was terrified of it, but I couldn't accept a spiritual tradition that allowed me, that excluded other people. So I said, well, what about if I just embody spiritual values, spiritual states, and find a way to do that? I can go to any tradition. I can sculpt, I can carve, I can embody their beliefs. So that was what I was trying to do. So when you look at that Judas, and this ties into the writing self, you look at that Judas image and think about who Judas was. Put the image back up if you can.
Yeah, I'm doing it right
All
now.
right. This was one of the second or third sculptures I did. Very, very realistic. But who was Judas? Judas was a zealot who thought that Jesus was a revolutionary, who at a time, the act that caused Judas to turn on Jesus was when Jesus was allowing himself to be anointed with oils that were expensive and valuable. And Judas said those could have been used, sold for who knows how much money, and the money given to the poor. At the same time, he was probably, if we're to believe sort of the theological interpretations of things and the Gospels and the Scriptures, he was being called to a task. He was being called to a task to do something in the sacred history of the world. So he was a man who was owned by a larger spiritual force, at the same time was seeing a betrayal of who he was, a betrayal of what he believed in by this man that he trusted. And so I wanted to create a sculpture that showed both his interiority and the anger, the frustration, the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty. And so that was my interpretation. So independent of the interpretation, what I was doing was a meditation on a certain level of spirituality and doubt and belief and faith. And that's what my sculpture always was. Go to the Joseph piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Find the Joseph piece. See if we can find that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get there slowly.
Better slow. Not at all. Okay. This sculpture, which was the second piece that I did, was commission. I was struggling in a relationship with a woman, and she had a little girl, and the girl was not my girl. I loved that little girl. The relationship wasn't going so well. A good woman, but just things were not working out. Uh, I needed some time alone, and okay, we got some feedback.
I'm sorry. I'm getting there.
Is that you or me? We okay? Now we got nothing. Is it me?
No, it's me. Let's see if I can do this again. Can you hear me okay? Check.
You sound good to me, but we've got a reverberation still.
Okay.
Maybe it's me. Maybe let me pull out the headphones and see what happens if I talk better this way. Hear me, Mel?
I can hear you. Sorry, guys. There was a problem. There's a problem with my microphone.
All right.
Give me one
Anyway,
second as I solve this. Go ahead.
you can deal with that end. I'll just keep going on this. I found this monastery in British Columbia, Westminster Benedictine Abbey. And I said I needed some time away, some time alone to try to figure out what the relationship was and who it was that I was. Boy, we're all over the place on this. It's hard to, not a pro TV person, so when I hear a reflection of my own voice, it breaks the concentration. And all right, anyway, good. There we go. So I said, I'll go there, and I said I would work. What I wanted to do was a sculpture. It was a perfect place because their patron saint is is Joseph the Worker. And I thought, well, what could be better than do a sculpture of Joseph the Worker? Because who was Joseph? The father of a child, not his own, who had to raise a child who was not his own. If I spend the time it takes to make a sculpture, go to the one of the closer shots if you can. Can you find the closer shot, Mel?
I'm working on it.
All right, but I'll just keep talking until we get it. I said, if I can find the sculpture, it's a meditation on the peace of a struggling fatherhood. And if the Judas was a meditation on a struggle of faith, belief, betrayal, focus on the individual versus service to the world, the Joseph was a meditation on fatherhood and acceptance and kindness. And I'd love to see you find a button that gave us a close up of the face. And he's working at it. Let's see what we get.
I'm just downloading it now for you.
All right, let's see what we got. There we go. Yeah. So that's what that was, and you can see what I was trying to do. When you make a sculpture, when you work with something for months, you become it. You become the wood. You become the image. And I wanted to do this as an extended meditation on the character of Joseph. All right, so jump ahead. Well, what I discovered in working on these sculptures was that I could apply my ideas to them, but I couldn't overtake the power of the wood. The wood had a voice. The wood had a character. The wood had an identity, and the wood had a life, just like I did. A tree has a life. Trees are like us. They have their feet in the ground, their head in the sky. They have a lifespan that's a duration we understand. They respond to the seasons. Trees are very much like us, but they each have a character. And so I found that I was working with a material that wouldn't allow me to put my ideas in it, pure and simple. It wanted to talk to me. I like to tell about one tree that I did a sculpture in that was the tree was so sad that I didn't want to work in it. I would talk to it every day and say, I'm sorry I'm doing this to you. I'm sorry I do this to you. And you could tell it was sad. It smelled bad. It was punky. It had some rings that were extensive. It had areas of, it was like a sick body. And I felt the pain of this tree. And no one talked about the tree and the life force in the tree. And I said, I've gone as far as I can go. I'm technically as good as I am, and I'm not as good as these sculptures look. They're good photographs from good sides. But I got to the point where I said, I need to find out what this is about the power of the tree. And the only people that talked about it were the Native Americans. They would talk about the Iroquois carved their images into live trees, their masks in live trees to get the power of the tree in them. There are people on the northwest coast who the trees are still standing, where they would carve an image into the tree and it would grow up with the tree. So I sort of changed my aesthetic to say two things happened. One is I changed my aesthetic to saying I have to try to make the tree itself come alive. Can you get that one, the elegy sculpture?
Absolutely.
Yeah, see if we can get that one up. Two versions. There's the one out in the woods, and then the one that's a display sculpture or display image. So anyway, I wanted to find a place where the power of the tree spoke through the power of the image. Try to blend the two of them together. And this was the last sculpture I did. I still have it. And if there's anyone out there that has a place they wanted, that's got a budget and a place to put this sculpture, this was the last piece I did before I switched over to writing. And this is in a gallery situation. Do you have the version of it where it's out in the woods? The one with the trees? All right, let's see if we get that.
I do. Let me just bring that up for you.
All right,
because there's about 14 pictures. Go on,
God knows. Between what I sent you and your technology, boy, we're fighting a wave here, but we'll get it. But this piece he's going to bring up shows it in its setting out in the woods where it was actually done. And I weathered it in a lake. I weathered it out in the trees. I weathered it in the wood. It's actually a piece of black walnut, but you would never know it. It looks almost like a found form. And it's called elegy. It's really a meditation on sadness, death, and it's a crucifixion in a way. It's half crucifixion and half resurrection, in that the crucifixion, it's being pulled into the ground, and at the same time, it's seeking to rise into the sky. And Mel is going to push a button, and we're going to see it in situ, or we're not.
I'm trying to sift through it, my friend.
So anyway, this was the last sculpture I did before I shifted over to writing. And I shifted over to writing because what I did, there we go. All right. Yeah, so there it is. This is a piece of black walnut. We got that reverberation again. You got the magic button, right? Yeah. This is a piece of black walnut. It doesn't look like walnut. It's weathered. It's an image. Like I said, it's an image that it's both. My sculptural meditation for this was the Rondinini Pietà of Michelangelo. It's the last work he did. There's just a fragment. He was 89 years old, I think, and it was just it's just a sculptural disaster, but it yearns at the same time it goes into the ground. And that's what this was. It was an attempt to escape and being pulled down into the ground. And I just titled it Elegy, and I finished it. And I was doing this at the same time. I took a job on the Red Lake Reservation. That's how we shift into writing. I was looking for the chance came to work with the Native people who I thought might be able to teach me something about their aesthetic. And my wife and I, we moved to northern Minnesota, and there was no work. Sculpture is not a way to make a living, I assure you. And I had this chance to go work on the Red Lake Reservation to do an oral history project. So I took the job. And in taking that job, I discovered a people and a way of understanding and a way of living that tied everything together for me. Yes, the culture was relatively decimated. Uh, yes, there was there were problems. It was difficult being a teacher there. Uh, but what I saw in those people and what I was able to do because of who I was and because of what I brought to the task, I said, this is my job in life. It's not to make sculptures that go into churches that I don't even like and places that I don't understand. It's to serve the native people. I went to their burials. I went to their homes. We took the students out into the into the community, and we would take them out to bring baskets of food to the elders. We would go to the elderly nutrition center, and what I met in these people were people with a spiritual clarity under all the cultural wreckage of what we had done to them. People who had a sense of the spiritual and the power of mystery and everything. People who had a broader understanding of family. People who understood the elders and valued the elders as something other than senior citizens, and just people with whom I felt more comfortable and more at peace than I ever had, because they answered those three questions that I talked about at the beginning, those three worlds that I struggled with in our contemporary American world. And so at that point, I decided, all right, I have a talent. And not only do I have a talent, I have a moral obligation. That suddenly I was being told, this isn't something that's important. This is something essential, something you can do. And so since that time, I stayed with writing. The books like Simple Truths that you look at and Letters to My Son, which it came from, were me trying to take all the lessons I had learned in my graduate school, in my spiritual formation, in my prayer life, in my intellectual life, and try to put the lessons down. And gradually, the task became to infuse this search for an authentic spirituality with the values of the Native Americans that I was discovering, and I felt had been so lost in our national dialogue and so lost in our own American psychic self. So, I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm going anywhere, but I'll stop with that, and that gets us to the
Yeah,
sculptures a bit. Yeah.
and I think what I wanna speak of, Kent, is you talk about writing. So I know that you had this great passion, and maybe continue.
You're frozen. The man is frozen on the screen. Well, we'll sit.
Let's see if he comes
Yeah,
back.
there you are. Okay, you're there.
Okay. Yeah, so we spoke about in the past, Kent, about being a sculptor was your passion, and you chose writing. What I want to talk about is it's something that I've wanted to share with you for a number of years, especially when I heard that interview about how you talked about writing having a particular rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about that is I connect with that because as a martial artist, there's a rhythm. I teach boxing as if my student were to listen to the sound of the pads and hear the rhythm in which the pads and the sound of you hitting it makes. But that's why in my post, Kent, I said, you just have this way. I can feel your rhythm in your writing, and I want to speak to that a little bit. What does that mean to you when you say you found your rhythm in your writing?
Well, back up a step. Art is a modality. Art is a way of bringing something new into the world that didn't exist before. One of the great things about the graduate program at Graduate Theological Union in UC Berkeley was that I was able to be around a lot of different artists. And since that time, I've been around a lot of artists. And what I discover is that people that art is nothing more than a modality. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's the artistic spirit that you have inside of you. I'm a better writer than I am a sculptor. And I wish I could have been a better sculptor, because I think that was what my spirit wanted to do. But way down inside, I'm a musician. I think music is the mother art. Music it's a magical art, because when we all know that feeling of when you hear a piece of music, you hear 2, 3 bars, you know that piece of music, uh, and, and you don't know how, you don't know why, but rare is the piece of writing that when you hear 2 or 3 words, you know where it's from. Our music has this magic, and some of my love of music, I mean, it's born into me. I just always loved music more than anything. If you put me and you said, okay, here's the deal, you're going to your famous desert island that we all talk about, and everyone says you can bring one book. Well, if you said to me, you can have the library of everything that was ever written in the history of time, or Bach's Mass in B minor, I take Bach's Mass in B minor, because that's all I need. Music is more important to me than literature. I listen to more music than I read. I've always felt that the music inside of writing is what's important. And we go back a little bit. I'm surprised at the things I'm saying, the positive things I'm saying about my Catholic upbringing, because I don't think too highly of the Catholic Church these days. But what it did to me, the High Mass and the Latin and the language, the rhythm of the Latin, hearing all of that was, it embedded itself in me. And it's something I like to do with kids when I talk to them about writing, and rhythm, and the power of music and rhythm inside of writing is to say, okay, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down, hickory dickory dock. Same thing. That rhythm is the rhythm inside of music is what makes music, or the rhythm inside of writing is what makes writing so powerful. And I care about writing. I craft my sentences. God, I craft my sentences. I remember, I wrote this down just because there were a few things that struck me in the world of literature when I was younger. I remember reading in college, coming across this line in Milton, from Paradise Lost. Thus roving on in confused march forlorn, the adventurous bands, with shuddering horror pale and eyes aghast, viewed first their lamentable lot and found no rest. Through many a dark and dreary vale they passed, o'er many a region dolorous. Oh, that's not good. Let me do that again. Through many a dark and dreary vale they passed, and many a region dolorous, where many a frozen, many a fiery alp, rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and shades of death. For some reason, that phrase caught me, and I said, listen to that. Listen to the march of these dark images. And when, and this was back before I'd ever, really said I was going to switch over to writing, but I suddenly saw the power of the power of the march, the power of the rhythm, the power of the music in that. And so when I write, I want my work to have music inside of it. And that's where I come closer to having been helped by scripture, by sacred texts of all traditions, than I have by literature. It's because most of them are reduced to music and poetry. So for me, there's poetry inside of all writing if it's done well. And I take it very seriously that my work should have in it something. It may not catch you in the way that a song does in the first three bars of a song, but if it's done right, like the piece you read, it goes inside the being and stays inside. And you may not be able to recall it exactly, but you know it's in there and you find it. So music has been the key to writing for me. I'm a musician who writes. I'm a sculptor who writes. I sculpt my words, and I put music inside of my language. I just happen to be a good writer. And but if I had it to do over, I would be a conductor. I would be a musician, but I was never trained in it. I never had it. And you see people it always touches me when I see people who love to sing and can't sing a lick, who wish they could play an instrument, but it doesn't mean the music isn't inside of them. It's just that the vehicle to get it out wasn't something that they either were trained in or given as a God-given gift.
And I want to talk about one musical experience, or at least an experience with somebody who's famous musically, and your connection to Robert Plant.
Isn't that something?
Like the Robert Plant.
Right.
Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant.
Yeah, utterly ridiculous and utterly wonderful. My bell cow is neither wolf nor dog. In the same way that Robert Plant will always be associated with Stairway to Heaven. I could write all the great literature between now and the end of time, and people would say, "Oh yeah, that's all good stuff," but you wrote neither wolf nor dog. There's an occasional outlier like Mel who says, "Oh, you wrote Simple Truths," but mostly it's neither wolf nor dog. So anyway, Neither Wolf Nor Dog, which is the story of sort of a nonfiction novel about my travels with a man named Dan through South Dakota, a Lakota man who looks at American culture and teaches us his way of understanding the world and his way of understanding the culture he was brought up in and the one that he sees around him, and talks about things like the difference between leaders and rulers, the difference between land and property. He's very insightful, and he tells significant truths. And it's written into a good story. It's written into a narrative that actually is, in many ways follows a gospel narrative, and it also follows sort of an Odysseus story. But anyway, it's the bad cat that won't die. That it keeps staying out there. And Robert Plant, in one of his tours, found it in tattered cover, a big bookstore in Denver, one of the most important bookstores in the country, Independence. And I get a call from my publisher, the woman at the desk, saying there's some guy who wants to talk to you. And he said, I got a call from his representative and he wants to talk to you. And I said, I get calls like this a lot. Some guys are named Mel Bellissimo, some guys are named Robert Plant. And I tend to avoid them all. And anyway, I said, well, who's this guy? She said, well, Robert Plant. And, when I say Robert Plant to you, you go, oh my God. You say Robert Plant to me, I go, yeah, that Led Zeppelin guy, the guy that kicks down walls and hotels and stuff like that. And screams a lot. And I was just never, a Led Zeppelin fan. Like I said, I came out of a more beatnik tradition. And you say if Leonard Cohen called, I'd be on the ground licking his boots. But Robert Plant means, it meant little to me. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll talk to him. That's fine. And so anyway, they called back and connected me with him. He was on a tour in the eastern part of the U.S. And he called and said, it's Robert Plant. I just want to tell you, I really liked that book. He said, you're going to be speaking anywhere, maybe in Red Lake or something? Man, this guy didn't know anything. Red Lake, it's a convenience store in the middle of the woods. But I said, well, I'm going to be at the South Dakota Festival of the Book. He said, well, perhaps I'll pop out. Okay. Pop out just fine. Nothing. I'll just fly here, fly there. The guy's got more money than the Pope. He can go where he wants. So anyway, right. He said he was going to come out there. So he flew out with his girlfriend at the time, a wonderful woman. And I don't know the guy. I have a phone number to call when I'm driving in from Minnesota to Deadwood in South Dakota. And I have a phone number to call to meet this guy, this musician who's significant to a lot of people, but no one to me. And he's staying in a in an Airbnb or something there. And I call and I talk to him, and he says, I'm at this address. And I go up there and open the door. And he comes out and gives me a big hug. And I say, hey, nice to meet you, Robert. And he's Robert Plant. And there's his girlfriend, Deborah. And I told myself several things when I went out to meet him, knowing that he was famous. Number one is I wasn't going to talk rock and roll with him. Number two, I wasn't going to try to get my hand in his pocket. And number three was seeing that he had his girlfriend there. I know how it is that all the attention is going to go to Robert. She's going to be standing there in the background and no one's going to pay any attention. I said, it's not the way it's going to be with me. I want to know about this woman as well. So anyway, we talked for a while. He came to my talk, and it wasn't a great talk. I wasn't on my game that well, but it was okay. But he was there, and he tried to sneak in the background. Big auditorium. He snuck in the background. A few people noticed him, but mostly they didn't. And I was not going to get, I was going to protect his anonymity to the extent that I was able to. Anyway, we got done. We'd had a good time, and he said, well, what are you up to? And you have any time left? He said, we've got a few days. He said, well, why don't we just go out and take you through the Black Hills and the Badlands and down to the reservation? Because I love that part of South Dakota. South Dakota is an unknown gem. Both Dakotas are unknown gems. And so he said, sure. So he and Deborah and I traveled through the Black Hills, and which are magical if you've never been there. I mean, these are the spiritual center of the Lakota world. There's a reason why they consider it the spiritual center. We went down to Wounded Knee, which figures largely both in my own spiritual experience and in Neither Wolf Nor Dog. We got there on the night of the full moon, and it was a blood moon, and had a very powerful experience there with some people that we met, and drove back up through the Badlands, and I saw what his world was when we stopped in Wall Drug. Now, Wall Drug is, for those of you that don't know, it's this ridiculous tourist trap in the middle of South Dakota that you see signs in Singapore saying 6,400 miles to Wall Drug. People put them up everywhere. And it's just this hokey little collection of buildings where people go, because they're going to Wall Drug. And anyway, we go in there, and people are seeing Robert Plant and recognizing him. He's got no anonymity. His money has brought him fame, but it's brought him no peace, no nothing in terms of being able to be free in the world. With me, I didn't care. I didn't care who he was. Everybody's the same to me. I truly believe that. I will not, the human being inside is more important than the status of the person. So anyway, he and I were just doing fun. We had a great time. He had a wonderful time. He was able to be anonymous. And when we got back, he signed some things for me. I signed some things for him. And he took Neither Wolf Nor Dog back to England and worked out a publishing deal with the Canongate Books. And through them, they had me come to England, actually to Wales, and do this Hay on Wye Literary Festival. My wife and I went there, and we stayed in Robert's little hometown. He stayed in his hometown because it's one place where he can be anonymous. They call him Planty, and he's just Planty. He just happened to get rich and live in a big manor out in the country. But we spent time with him. He drove us to the festival in Wales. We went on stage together, and we become friends. I've seen him a couple times since he's been here. What's significant is not the friendship, but what an interesting guy he is. Imagine you have all the money in the world. You cannot have more money. What would you do? Imagine that you could go nowhere without people saying, you're Robert Plant, you're Robert Plant. When you sign this, you're eating lunch, you're walking down the street. How would you treat people? I won't vouch for Robert's relationship to women. That seems to have, he seems to have a little broader span of interest in different women than I would, and maybe in his situation, I don't know. But I will say he's a kind man, a thoughtful man, a very intelligent man. He knows his history. And I don't know that if I were in his situation, I would be as good a man as he is. And so I've learned to listen to his music. I've learned to understand his craft, the way that he doesn't want to be Led Zeppelin anymore. He's worked with North African musicians. Now he's working with Alison Krauss, doing their own songs that have a sort of a country western flavor. He grows as an artist. He grows as an artist, and he's a very good man. And I count him as a friend. And it was just absolute serendipity. And it's one of those things that makes this kind of odd, peripatetic, intellectually peripatetic life be valuable. And so, Robert, that's my Robert Plant story.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, my God, I have friends that would like you say with Leonard Cohen, lick his shoes
That's
if you
right.
could,
That,
you know. But Kent, I want to touch on something here, especially with regards to the fact that you were one of the very few to be able to share the stories of the native or indigenous people. And I want to apologize ahead if I don't not using the right terminology. But I want to talk to you a little bit about that experience because I have a bit of a metaphysical background. We talked a lot about the native cultures, shamanic practices,
Mhm.
and what have you. But one of the things that I'm because we just don't have the time. You have, I mean, an abundance of stories that you could tell, and even that I've heard stories with Dan and Chief Joseph. But what I want to know is if you could sum it up in a few points, Kent, what is it that we could take from, let's call it the native book, and apply to the white man world that we should really pay more attention to?
Mhm.
I want to know if you could sum that up because
Well,
I don't know if it's possible, but maybe you could give it a
I
shot.
don't know if it's possible either, but I will say uh, this book here, Voices in the Stones, was, let's see, there we go. Okay, no, okay, there, all right. That I
Yeah.
bring it up because it's not a very well known book, but there were two books of mine. The first one being Letters to My Son, which got sort of boiled down in reduction to simple truths that you have. And the other one being Voices in the Stones, where I turn and face my audience and say, this is what I think you need to know. All my other books, uh, I say, come along with me. I'm going to paint a picture for you, take you on a journey, and we will discover it together. It's been my way of writing. But these two books, those two books, or actually three books, if you count Simple Truths and Letters to My Son as separate books, I stand and face the audience. In Voices in the Stones, Life Lessons in the Native Way, I try to lay out what I think are the things that we need to know uh, from the Native people. And I can't read from it; that would take way too long. But here are some of the things that I think we need to take from them. One is that we are part of nature, not apart from nature. You can't talk about nature. The human being is a part of nature. When you learn from nature, and I have to go into a different mode in order to actually do this. That what's out there is not for us to exploit; it's for us to learn from. Um, there's a unity to our belief in evolution. Actually, our belief in evolution, our belief in the creation stories, Christian and Judaic creation stories, and the native people, that the human being is the one who came last. Well, the way we're raised is to think that the human being is, because we came last, we're the apex of creation, image and likeness of God, we're the apex of the evolutionary chain. But for the native people, we came last because nothing that came before us needed us. Each thing has its
Wow.
inherent and intrinsic knowledge, and we are here to honor that knowledge and learn from that knowledge. Uh, Look at the bear. These are sort of clumsy versions of that sound antiquated, but there's something there. Look at the way the bear raises its children. He's someone who runs the children hard and runs them to make them strong. Is that the way we want to raise our children? Do you want to raise your children the way that the eagle raises the child? Put them up high against the winds of the world and say, learn to stand against this, or the way the oriole raises the child, by putting it inside an enclosed nest and letting it grow and get strong before it has to deal with the outside world. The Native people observe. They observe nature to learn from it. We have forgotten. We've put ourselves at the apex of creation. And this is something that we have to build into our understanding of the world. They kind of things like, what's the drum? Why do they play the drum? Well, the drum is something that where you hit it in one place, it reverberates everywhere else. Why do they use the drum? It's the heartbeat, it's the rhythm of the heartbeat, and everything reverberates with everything else. Their way of understanding, and this is baked into their cultural DNA. Like I mentioned, their family, their sense of family. I don't do a great job with family. I mean, it's been a struggle with a blended family. I do okay, and I do as well as the next person, not as well as the best of them. But I understand family like we all were raised to understand family. The rock in the pond is the mother and father, and then it goes out from there, and it goes out to the distance until the ripples suddenly disappear. The Native people look at it as that each family member has a role. And I mentioned this because this was something I took very seriously in raising my son. For example, the uncle. The uncle is a crucial person because the father is assumed to either be too tough on the kid or to be of a son, and I'm referring to a son here, too tough on the son, or is considered to be too solicitous of him because he's so much in love with him as the first son. Whereas the uncle has the responsibility, the responsibility to teach and to share and provide moral guidance and to send the child into the world. So I've told my son that I've talked to him about this. I said, your job as an uncle to my grandkids is that's your responsibility. You're not just somewhere that's one step further out in the ripples in the pond. Your job is very specific. You have the uncle's responsibility. The elders. It sounds self-serving now that I'm the age that I am, but the belief that life is not a straight line journey from birth to death with this period of productivity and fecundity in the middle and then this glide path at the end, but instead is a cycle of seasons. And only the person in the fourth season understands what went on in all the 3 seasons before. No matter what their life experience is, they understand something. There's a commonality of understanding the human experience in that process of life. So the elder should be listened to, not just used to for school projects, but the elder has no investment anymore other than sharing the worth of their experience. And this is the kind of thing in working with the Native people that I'd be something we were going to do. I was going to go on a trip or something. I'd take the kids on a trip and they say, I got to go ask my grandma. And it was because you went to the grandparents. You asked for their approval and understanding. This was just a different way of understanding the world. Give me one more example. I know I'm going on with this, but I was at a feast. They have these feasts, they call them, which really is just a potluck. If you're in the Midwest, I don't know what you call it in Ottawa, but everyone gets together and a bunch of stuff on a table, and there's inside of tinfoil wrappers, and most of it you don't want to eat. And at the end, the people that didn't want to spend any time making it bring a bunch of potato chips and pop. And so you've got this long thing, and the Indians do it all the time, and it's a feast. And they have feasts for any number of reasons. It's always to honor something or someone. And in their tradition, the elders should eat first, not the children. We always send our children up first. I do it. Everyone does. Get the kids, get them at the table, get them done. They're acting like crazy. They're putting potatoes in their hair. Get them out here. Sit them down. And
that's right.
I remember one time there was this one friend of mine, and I watched him. I wrote about this in Voices in the Stones. He has this his daughter and one of her friends. And he said, well, there was a feast, and they sent them up first to get the plates of food for the elders. And, and again, think of this. We're formica tables in a school gym, folding chairs, paper plates and plastic forks, and styrofoam cups. As ordinary as you can get. They get the food, and they bring it to the elders who are sitting on the side in wheelchairs or just in chairs, and they serve them. Then they stand back and wait until the end in order to eat. And, I could no more make my kids and grandkids do that. I try to talk to them about it. I've seen elders try to talk to groups of non-native kids, and even some of the native kids now, they don't see this, they don't hear this. But this kind of respect for the elders is something that they have. So, right now, we're looking at a very odd time in history. We've got a bunch of old white men in charge of the world, and they're not doing very well. They should be handing these off. The job of the elder, and this is the Native people understand, is there comes a time when you hand it off and you become a mentor, you become a teacher. But it's not the marching band refused to yield. You don't keep trying to hold on to power in the way that we're seeing. The world changes, the understanding of the world changes. You inform, educate, and serve the generation coming up. You don't hold on to that power and do bad things with it. So these are sort of the kind of things that are embedded in the Native understanding of the world. This reflection that everything is a part of nature, that the family is a larger experience, that there is a spiritual presence in everything. Even the funkiest drug dealer Indian, when you get the drum out, then they start drumming. They become respectful. If I said to you, everybody, let's get down on our knees and pray, 90% of the people, myself included, are going to turn and run. But when you're a Native people, you say, bring out the drum, and we're going to pray. Even though it's not an overt prayer, they're there. Spirit inheres in everything. The power, it's not the sacred and the profane, its spirit is in everything. So these are just some of the things that I found with the Native people that I absolutely love and try to, and have tried to learn from and try to pass on. And that's my job right now, is to try to pass things on. I am in an elder status. I don't, I'm struggling with it. I don't know what to do with it. I make jokes about it, but it's real. This is my job between now and the end of my time, is to pass on what I'm doing. And someone like you gives me an opportunity to do it. But, ultimately, you don't know what's heard. It's a tree falling in a forest, but at least you're falling. So,
100%. And I love that, Kent, because I've been told, my first Thai boxing teacher, Kent, used to tell me that, Mel, you're the kind of guy that sees beauty in everything and in everyone. And I love that. And I think that for me was sort of the beginning of me starting to understand my own spirituality.
mm-hmm.
Because that was 25 years ago. And I took this journey through metaphysics and understanding the journey of the self. But I love that I've come to now, even at an age like almost 47, Kent, where last spring I had an experience with I'm not a very good, it was a tree. It was some kind of, a magnolia tree.
Mm-hmm.
Kent, I was walking my little boy, pushing him in his little cart, and I stopped and I looked through the park. And there was as if this tree was speaking to me. And I know that someone's going to say, Mel, I think you're a crackpot. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to tell you that experience of looking at that magnolia tree as if the tree was speaking with me, Kent, was such a profound and powerful experience for me. And I love that you've talked about how that in the indigenous people, there's this element of spirituality with everything that they do. And that to me is so refreshing, because I think that that's what's lacking in the world.
And the last thing with that is, they have told me, and I remember taking the Indian kids out and talking to one of the community leaders who was very responsible for teaching the kids, and he said, we've always been taught that the first thing you have to learn is how to listen. That And listening is not merely auditory. Listening's with the heart. It's being getting the nonstop words and thoughts in your mind out of your mind. There's a lot of ways to do it. I'm sure that the boxing you do, the martial arts, is a way to do that. But quiet, quiet the self and listen. That's the only time you're going to hear the trees. It's the only time you're going to hear the rock. It's the only time you're going to hear the spaces in conversations. It's the only time you're going to hear the yearning in someone who, by all superficial levels, is an angry person. I mean, silence is draws things. Deep silence and stillness draws things to you. And we need to learn that because we're a noisy people. We're intellectually noisy people. I mean, my wife is on my case always about all you're doing is thinking. Well, sometimes yes, a lot of times yes, but there's a lot of time no. I want to be quiet. We need to learn how to listen. That's what the native people say, and so that's I think what the hardest thing for us right now. We think we have to dominate, but you don't dominate by talking. You don't dominate by giving orders. You dominate by serving. You dominate by listening. And you're not even out. Domination's the wrong word. You advance human people, your humankind, your friends, and everything by listening and serving what it is that they need to hear. So you know, you
100%.
struggle.
Yep.
Like I said, muddling through the world trying to be kind. That's about the best we can hope for. And it's my job at this point. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that my father, who passed last July, Kent, he always used to say to me, "Hey, you talk a lot, kid. Why do you think God gave you two ears and one mouth?
Yep.
So that you can do double the
Uh-huh.
listening than you do talking."
Okay.
But I love that because there's a line that I say, Kent, that when I'm speaking with clients or friends or family, that there's a lot of knowledge in the silence.
Mhm.
I've come to really appreciate that, and why I have a meditation practice that I participate in every day. Um, Kent, I don't know what to tell you, but I I really could spend days just listening to your stories and sharing that knowledge. But I wanna ask you one question before we close the show, because believe it or not, we're already at 90 minutes. I can't even believe it. But if you could share with me, Kent, what are three things that you would say you're most proud of in your life?
I could talk about things outside of myself. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my wife. I'm proud of things like that, but I'll keep it close to the vest here. I'm proud of what a good father I've been. I don't know that I've been as good a stepfather as I could have been. I don't know that I've been as good a husband as I would have liked to have been, but I've been a hell of a good dad. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I've managed to stay authentic in my life. And even when I don't act authentically, I keep the authentic core. And so it comes out when someone needs it. Uh, and I'm maybe most proud of the fact that the Native people trust me with their knowledge and their stories. I'm going to read you something. I mean, the guy sent me this morning. He's an Ojibwe man. Named, well, I won't give his American name, but Keisha Ose. He said, I read your post at 4 a.m. this morning and smiled. Your journey through my ancestors' teachings and way of life is what I see in your contemplation of your writing. Even the time of year of your deep thoughts, as if you got a peek into our soul and our relationship to all things. My friend, I too have learned much from your writing. It's a native guy. And when a native person tells me that I've taken in what they have without appropriating it, and that they respect the way I've done it, and that hopefully I've given it back in a way that expands people's way of understanding the world, and that I stumbled, I stubbed my toe, but I've never failed in that regard. And that's going to end up being the legacy that I have. And so I feel I'm proud of that. Uh, I guess that's it. I don't think in terms of pride very much, but to the extent that I'm proud of things, those are things I'm proud of.
Yeah, yeah, that's fabulous. That's fabulous, Kent. I mean, you certainly have what I call found your zone of genius, especially when it comes to putting the pen to paper or the hands to keyboard now.
Mhm.
In the way that you found your rhythm in writing, in the way that your writing has touched my soul and the souls of many others around the world. I think that what you've shared, and what you continue to share in your experiences with Native Americans and natives everywhere, because I know that there was a time when there was someone in an indigenous community in South America
Mhm.
that wanted you to go and write a book
The
for them.
Maoris as well in New Zealand. Some have
There you
contacted.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just really a testament to the work that you've done. The way that I see it is that if Native people from countries all over the world are contacting you so that you could write a book for them, to me it represents a testament of you being in your zone of
Right.
genius. And so I'm grateful and really humbled and honored, Ken, to be able to have this and share this with the world, with the hopes that maybe your son is going to watch this, and have a little more perspective
Mhm.
on who his dad is.
That would be great. And well, I'll leave you with only one thought. Lest we fly off into the, the highest heavens of aspiration and inspiration, I like to point to the way a Dutch friend of mine once said about Kent. He said, "Oh, he's just an old man with strange ideas," and so I'm willing to live with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
So, Kent, one more before I let you go. My brother from Colombia, he was the one who gave me this book, whatever, 20 some odd years
mhm.
ago, and I promised that I was going to ask you, but Kent, do you know how many copies of this book you've actually sold?
I don't have any idea. It's
Really,
inside the
eh?
vault of the publisher's true or false accounting system, and I know that it's influenced people. I know that it's been around the world, but I don't have any idea how it's sold. We don't see the publishing's a business, writing's an art. I don't know much about the business side of it. Like I said, mostly speaking, if to almost everyone I talk to, if I had half your money, I'd throw all mine away. And you you don't make a living as a writer, but you hopefully touch people. And I know it's touched people, but I don't know how many books it's sold. So sorry, brother out there. Uh, I'm not
Yeah.
avoiding it. I just don't have a clue.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Again, I have to thank you, Kent. My friend, dear friend Sandra, is with us today, and she says, "Thank you for sharing your stories. Wonderful chat with two amazing human beings. I will be sure to add simple truths to my next read."
All right. So thanks so
And
much.
Josh, our beloved moderator here at the show, says, "Thank you for sharing some of your journey and insight with us, as well as several of your amazing sculptures, Kent. Such a rich conversation." You really have touched my heart, Kent. And I'm going to try to do this without getting emotional, but your words have saved my life. And to me, that's that's something that I can't say to about a lot of people. And so for me, it was a dream come true for me. I have lived my some of the greatest minutes of my life in this engulfed in this conversation with you.
Well, it's what we live for, is to try to do some good for other people, to help other people. And if it did
100%,
something
my
to
friend.
you, maybe that's why we were supposed to talk. So thanks so much. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening, for those of you that stayed. And off we go,
Absolutely.
onward into the fog.
And just so that you know, Kent, I am still opening up the idea for you and your wife to come and take the Crew Mel food tour
She
right here in Ottawa, Canada.
heard about that, and she got her knives and forks out. She's ready to go. So
Thank you, Kent.
okay.
Thank you again. I'm going to put you back in the green room. I'm going to just put you back as I give my final thoughts, and then I'll come right back to
All
you.
right.
Whew. My eyes were filling up there, my friends. Man, an ordinary guy? I mean, really, A simple guy. Very well spoken. I mean, there are a couple words I got to look up afterwards because I didn't really know what they were. But he's a super, super man, and I'm overjoyed with the opportunity. I called this in my post the interview of a lifetime because for me, again, the words of this little book, my friends, go and read this book. Clear and gentle guidance on the big issues in life. He dedicates the book, which we now understand a little more about Lloyd Nerburn and the impact that Lloyd had in Kent's life. But he divides his chapters onto what I call the biggest compartments of your life. Things on education and learning, on work, on money, on possessions. You know, I didn't get a chance to ask Kent this, but maybe I'll go backstage and I'll ask him, because there was a quote that I had saved, and it's a quote that I've used plenty of times here on the show, because we always talk about, we spend a great deal of our lives working in something called a career or in something called a job. And I just have to say that there's one particular quote from Kent Nerburn that, again, from the perspective of his rhythm in writing, how it touched my heart. Kent Nerburn explains that we should think of work as a vocation, which comes from the Latin word for calling, which comes from the word voice. When you look at it like this, work should be something that calls to you and that gives you voice to who you are and what you want to say in this world. Wow. My friends, if I can leave you with this one analogy. Many moons ago, I went to go see Philip Bailey and Earth, Wind and Fire sing at the casino in Niagara Falls. And I was overwhelmed with emotion when I heard Philip Bailey sing in his falsetto, because he, at whatever age he was well into his 70s at the time, he sang, and the first thing I thought of was that he was here, that God put him here to share his love through his voice. And I relate, and that for me is, I relate that to what I feel about our guest today, Kent Nerburn. That I believe that he has found his zone of genius and has put his love, his passion, and as he describes, the best version of himself in his writing. And when I read that quote about career and it being the voice, man, did Kent ever find his voice. Thank you, Kent, for finding your voice and sharing it with us through your words, through your books. Thank you. Before we go, next week on the Coffee and Biscotti Show. So this week, a gentleman 75 years old. Next week, a young lady of 27, if I'm not mistaken. Lexi Fontaine. I call her the wordsmith. An incredible woman with an incredible journey of struggle and physical challenges, and the beautiful goddess energy and the sunshine that she has become. So make sure that you're with us next week on the Coffee and Biscotti Show. Same time, 12 p.m. EST. Today we are off to Barcelona, Spain, where we get to visit Betty Wax and join us as International Women's Day raid train of some awesome female DJs. Thank you to everyone who was here. Sandra Mio, Poutine Nation, Smiling Spirits, everybody, Edwin, everybody who came and joined us. Franny, thank you for being here, sweetheart. I really appreciate you being here. And to all those that spent a moment here with us today on the Coffee and Biscotti Show. And as always, from my heart to yours, my friends, happy Friday and have yourself a fabulous weekend. I will see you here next week. Crew Bell. Signing off. I'm out of here.